So last time I got a lot of requests to cover characters like DDD, Wario and Wii Fit Trainer. And I will get around to doing that in the future since those characters require a bit more setup to make a video on. So for the time being, I'll be taking a look at everyone's favorite Smash 4 character. Now, what can I say about Bayonetta that hasn't been said already? Well, I could say that her hitboxes are perfectly normal and that there's nothing wrong with them, but that would be a lie, because they're not. Let's just say that Bayonetta is not looked upon as the best character in the game for no reason. But just how crazy are her hitboxes? Why don't we just get right into it? As always, I'll start with her jab. And already we have an example of a very generous hitbox, being way bigger than it has any right to be, with it even covering parts of Bayonetta's back. Granted, the red one only hits grounded opponents, but it's still very big overall. The second hit of jab has a really messy hitbox, with hitboxes all over the place. The light blue hitbox is meant to hit you back into the move should you fall too low. Aside from that, the rest of the hitboxes are just big as usual. The third hit is pretty small compared to the rest of her jabs, and its job is to set up into the rapid jabs coming afterwards. Then there is the rapid jabs themselves, which all have pretty huge hitboxes. And finally it finishes with two hitboxes. One that launches you up and one that launches you away. It's worth mentioning that all these hitboxes have an SDI multiplier of less than 1, which makes the moves harder to SDI overall. This move is just a taste of what's to come. This is far from the worst we're going to be seeing. I should also mention that the extended bullet darts in most cases are not visualized, with a few exceptions. So most of them I will not be covering, but I will cover those who are actually available. Just in case you were wondering. Up tilt is actually not the craziest move in her arsenal. Sure, the hitbox is fairly sized, but it's not groundbreaking. It consists of two hitboxes, with the green one hitting grounded opponents and the red one hitting aerial opponents, besides the final red hitbox which hits both. The hitbox that hits grounded opponents does not combo into the later parts of the move, but if you hit an aerial opponent, it does. Her down tilt is actually very reasonably sized. Granted, it used to be quite a bit bigger, but it was nerfed at one point, where they reduced its overall reach. But as it stands now, the hitbox is honestly not that outstanding. I guess not every one of Bayonetta's hitboxes are all that bad. Hey, so far the hitboxes have actually been pretty reasonable. Maybe I was wrong about Bayonetta. Maybe her hitboxes really aren't as bad as I made them out to. Oh. Well, I stand corrected. Her F-tilt is, let's just say, an interesting move. It looks like the developers tried to get a quick game of domino in there with looking at how the hitboxes are laid out, with grounded and non-grounded hitboxes all over the place. Alongside that, it has a bunch of different angles and knockback values. Like, look, this first part of the move is just a mess, but it works, so who am I to complain? The second part of the move has a much larger hitbox, to make sure that the final hit can be comboed into properly. It has much less going on than the first hit, so why don't we just get onto the biggest offender here? I don't care what you say, this hitbox is just not okay. Like, do I even need to explain why? I honestly get the feeling that they just could not be bothered to make the second hitbox properly combo into this hit, so they just made this hitbox stupidly huge to compensate for it. This move is just dumb, let's just move on. Her dash attack is actually pretty small. Its horizontal range is much bigger than its vertical. The move does last for a very long time though, for a total of 11 frames. And apparently Bayonetta doesn't even need to shoot her guns for them to deal damage. Hey, what did you expect? This is Bayonetta after all. Okay, so as you probably know by now, the online hitbox visualizer can actually not properly visualize a lot of moves. And one of these are Bayonetta's smash attacks, though Mishima uploaded a video showcasing her smash attacks, so all credit to him on this one. Aside from that, her smashes are honestly nothing that special. They are huge as you would expect, but in this case it kinda makes sense for them to be this big, both from a balance and animation standpoint. It does reach a little longer than you would expect, but not by that much. It's a simple move with a lot of sour spots and one sweet spot at the tip that deals 16 instead of 14 damage. It's also worth mentioning that all of her smash attacks have low priority, which simply means that if this move were to clash with another hitbox, the one with the low priority gets cancelled out. Pretty easy to understand. Her up smash works a little different, being 3 hitboxes that trace after the attack, as opposed to the last time where all the hitboxes came out at the same time. Besides that, the hitboxes themselves don't really have that much going on. They are pretty standard with no real interesting properties or anything really. Her down smash is a little more interesting, as it actually consists of 2 different attacks. When Bayonetta puts her foot down, it actually has a hitbox that can combo into the stomp part of the move. Aside from that, the hitboxes are pretty standard all around and does not really stand out that much. It's one of those moves where the frame data and hitbox size line up very nicely. Okay, I can't quite put my finger on how I want to describe Bayonetta's neutral air. Oh wait, I got it. How about absolutely not okay? I have no idea how anyone looking at this thought this was a good idea. Like, at all, whatsoever. The hitbox is massive and lasts way too long. And this is not even accounting for the extended version of the move that comes when holding down neutral air. Coincidentally, this is also the only move that has the extended bullet arcs visualized. And boy, is that a sight to behold. It straight up looks like a disco party. It's interesting to see how the bullets being shot actually work as well, as they don't really work the way you would expect them to. They're not projectiles, but long hitboxes that stretch far across the stage. What's kinda strange is how the hitboxes actually have their own hitbox category titled simply bullet arcs. Although they don't have any special property, which makes it pretty redundant, honestly. The extended part of the movie is obviously not as powerful as the first part, but when you take into consideration that it lasts basically as long as you want, on a character with one of the best recoveries in the game, it becomes kind of irrelevant how much damage it deals. This is just a move that has too much going on for it not to be stupidly good. And the worst part is that this is just the beginning. Her up air is very much the same story. The initial up air has a pretty big hitbox that lasts for a long time. It travels at an arc over Bayonetta. While not the most outrageous hitbox ever, it still has a pretty noticeable disjoint reaching higher than you expect. The extended bullet arcs on the other hand is where it gets dumb. And I mean that in two different ways. Because the animation just looks hilarious when there's no particle effect or bullet arcs to accompany it. Like, just look at it, it looks so silly. Okay, anyways, while the hitbox is much smaller than you would actually expect, this is not really a huge drawback when counting for how fast the hitbox moves around. The hitbox is big enough to cover a massive amount of area in just a few frames. It's a very good example of when a hitbox is not necessarily huge on its own, but still is very problematic because of other factors. Oh boy, I guess it's time to talk about back air. This hitbox is just gross. I wish I could just stop there and move on, but I guess it's kinda my job to talk about stuff like this. Everything about this move is just wrong. Why is the hitbox 3 times the size of Bayonetta's leg? Why does it last for 4 frames? Why does it kill so early? Only Sakurai knows. The hitbox itself is very big, and consists of 2 different hitboxes with a sweet spot that deals 13% and a sour spot that deals 10%. It has the Sakurai angle, which I went over in my last video, so if you're not familiar with the concept, you can go watch that. The Sakurai angle always leads to a very sharp angle of 40 degrees, which is what helps the move kill so early. It's a move that alone is just very good, and if it was on another character, I honestly wouldn't mind it that much. But when every other move you have is close to, if not even more ridiculous than this one, then I have a problem with it. Okay, maybe forward air will be a little better. It can't possibly be worse than back air. Are you serious? What did we do to deserve this? This absolute monstrosity of a hitbox is only the first part of the move, with it consisting of a total of 3 different moves. As you can clearly see, the first part of the move has a very large hitbox. It consists of 3 different hitboxes, all of which have different angles and knockback, with the intention of comboing into the second hit. I really could harp on this hitbox for a long time, but it would get a little redundant, seeing how I have already made it pretty clear how I feel about Bayonetta's hitboxes. So for the sake of flow, I'll just move on to the second part of the move. The second part of the move is almost identical, both in terms of size and knockback, so there's honestly not that much to say about it. The final launch rate is actually a little smaller than the first 2 hits, but has more active frames and moves a greater distance, which makes sure it properly connects. Aside from the hitboxes being way too big, it's overall not the worst move Bayonetta has. Also, can we talk about how Bayonetta has a hitbox on her bot? I mean, I can't say I'm surprised, but I just wanted to mention that. Lastly, out of the aerials we have down air. It consists of 3 different hitboxes and lasts for 17 frames, because why the hell not? It also has a pretty powerful spike, which is active for the entirety of the move. Sure, these spike hitboxes get a little smaller as the move goes on, but it's still just a little too much at once, honestly. The hitboxes themselves are not super huge, though lasting this long kinda makes up for that. If only that was the entirety of what the move was, that would be one thing. But it also has its own hitbox when landing on the ground, which just kinda makes me a little sad on the inside to look at. Not only is the hitbox massive, but it also has some insane knockback tied to it, having way higher base and knockback growth than it has any right to, which makes it able to do some pretty grimy stuff. Not like Bayonetta is unfamiliar with that to begin with though. And again, like I said earlier, this move would not be so bad on basically any other character. But when it is on a character with one of the best recoveries in the game, that just causes some problems. Alright, it's time to finish this. We only have the special moves left. And I guess you could say I've saved the best for last. Bayonetta's up B is probably one of the most infamous moves in all of Smash history. It's up there among Melee Shine and Brawl Tornado. It's almost undoubtedly one of the moves that have caused the most amount of grief amongst all the moves in Smash 4. The move comes out on frame 4, which is just not okay on many different levels. The initial hitbox that launches into the second part of the move is pretty decently sized, all things considered. It used to be bigger, but it was also nerfed in the Bayonetta nerf patch. The second part of the move is actually pretty interesting, and I'm not even surprised anymore when I see hitboxes like this. I've just grown so numb to it. It has weight-dependent knockback for most of the move, which the specifics of change as the move progresses. It's not really relevant, however, since the point is to keep the opponent inside the witch twist until the final hitbox comes out. Which is pretty huge as well, what did you expect? This move was actually given an increased SDI multiplier when the move was nerfed. So the move is in fact easier to SDI than most other moves. But the hitboxes are still so big to the point where you can easily get hit even with perfect SDI. The move on its own is not the worst, but it's this combined with the fact that it could combo into a ton of other stuff that makes it as bad as it is. Which, speaking of, I'm not gonna let side B get easy off either. It has 3 different versions, which already should raise some red flags, but I digress. I guess we can start with the grounded side B. The hitbox gets slightly less powerful as the move goes on, and the knockback angle changes as well to make sure it launches into the second part of the move, which also has a pretty above average hitbox size. This is probably the least outrageous out of the 3. The part of the move that is frustrating is how it is basically a 50-50 on shield, with the opponent usually being the one who gets the shorter end of the stick, should they guess wrong. The first aerial version of side B is pretty rough. It has a lot of side reach, and seeing how the move moves so far, it's very easy to get caught up in. The 2 different hitboxes have slightly different launch angles, with the green one having a sharper angle than the red one. Again, this is a case of the hitbox itself not being outrageously huge, although I believe this one is towing the line quite a bit. Though it wasn't as bad as the downwards version of side B, which probably holds the title for the hardest nerfed hitbox in Smash history. It went from this to this. Aside from that, it also lost its ability to consistently combo into up B, which was the primary combo starter for ladder combos back in the day. It now resides as a very good landing or simple pressure option, which is to say that it still very much has use despite the nerfs. But Smash history aside, it only consists of one singular hitbox, and it has the same issues as the upwards version of side B. A decently sized hitbox with way too much travel distance and active frames. It also has a landing hitbox, because having 3 different versions of one move just wasn't enough versatility. Bayonetta's side B just conceptually is where I think a lot of their problematic design comes from. I honestly can make an entire video on just that alone, so I won't get into it here. The only real silver lining here is that the move is at least not as broken as it used to be, but it's not like that says that much anyways. I was going to talk about neutral B, but expectedly enough it can't be visualized. This is pretty common among projectiles, so I'm not really surprised. So the only move we have left is Witch Time. Now Witch Time is a little unique compared to the other counters, and by that I mean it's way better than every other counter on basically every level. The move consists of 2 different hitboxes. The red one is the one that checks if the counter gets triggered. As in, if you hit one of your hitboxes with one of the red hitboxes, it will activate. Then after it is activated, the black hitbox checks if you are inside the black hitbox. And if you are, then you get the Witch Time effect. The black radius is actually not centered on Bayonetta and reaches further down than up, which is kinda strange. But hey, I'm not complaining, since that makes you less likely to get hit while trying to land with disjointed aerials. But hey, that's about it. Bayonetta's hitboxes are by far some of the most outrageous in the entirety of Smash 4. While some characters have similar hitboxes on 1 or 2 moves, no other characters have them quite in the volume that Bayonetta does. And I honestly think that is where her main problem lies. Her entire moveset is just oversaturated. But again, I might talk about this more on a later date. It's about time I wrap this up anyways. As always, if you have a suggestion for what character you want to see next, then leave a comment about it below, and I'll consider it for the next video. Anyways, that about wraps it up, so as always, thank you so much for watching.